everyone. Welcome to today's event where we'll be talking about all things innovation, entrepreneurship, and of course, COVID-19. We're really pleased to have you all with us. Thanks for your patience and thanks for being on time. We are going to get to cover a lot of exciting things today. We're going to learn a little bit more about why this event, who is bringing this event to you, and of course, the most exciting bit, you're going to hear from our panel of fantastic, you're going to hear from our fantastic panelists today. We'll also tell you a little bit more about the initiative that we want to start and we are excited to share with you. And so to kick us off, I'm going to invite Liz to share just a little bit about the backdrop for this event. So over to you, Liz.
Thanks, Sylvie, and welcome everyone. My name is Liz Karaoke, excited to see all of you here. I am in the entrepreneurship and innovation space as a communicator. So I'll just invite you to the event with giving you a bit of introduction before our session starts and before our panelists are ready. So as you know, Kenya is an entrepreneurship nation. We are here because we're either entrepreneurs or we're interested in entrepreneurship. So Kenya's entrepreneurship ecosystem continues to be very resilient and proves to the world that in times of difficulty lies excellent opportunity. So the statement I've just shared is backed up by major global reports that have placed Kenyan ecosystem on the map. So we have a couple of global reports that the big innovation organization look at. And according to the 2021 Global Innovation Index report, we'll be able to share the links. Kenya was ranked 85 in the world in the innovative global economies, making Kenya the most innovative African economy, second to South Africa. So what that means is we are actually the second country in Africa in terms of innovation. So that's pretty interesting. So we'll be dropping the link to the report as well so that you can see also what other countries are there and what the world has to say about Kenya. And a second report is the Global Startup Ecosystem 2021 report. It's a startup genome report and the Global Entrepreneurship Network report. So they've come together to put up a solid report talking about the startup ecosystem in the world. And it validates the claim that Africa and Kenya is part of the emerging economies and that we are progressively becoming frontiers in the global south. So I'll drop a link to that as well. So this may sound like, this may not sound like reality for some entrepreneurs because of course, the situations in our countries, situations where we work are a bit different. So hearing this big rankings that Kenya has can be a bit of a reality for some of the entrepreneurs in the room. But because at some level we are here, we're trying to push paper, we don't really have insight or that external eye on what's happening. So the pandemic hit us and we need to mute. If you come in, yeah. All right, perfect. So make sure you check your microphones, make sure you're muted while anyone is speaking. Unless you want to mute, you can raise your hand or drop a question in the comments or in the message box. So the 2020 pandemic came, we were hit by COVID in 2020, which marked the beginning of the biggest learning curve for every entrepreneur across the global market, including social enterprises who are forced to digitalize their operations, innovate for resilience, which was also a steep learning curve for most of them, if not all of us. So one positive outcome of from the hard times we find ourselves in is the realization that we need to support one another. So we need to encourage one another and learn from one another. So that we ensure that we have individual and collective good. So with this in mind, we bring you today's session to hear from founders who have pivoted towards sustained growth and to sit with support organizations like the CEO network that enables organizations to achieve positive social and economic impact. So to usher and to bring us in into that session, I would like to welcome Parag Campbell. He's the CEO and Managing Director at CEO Network to tell us more about how CEO strives to deliver impact through entrepreneurship and innovation. Welcome, Parag.
Parag, you're muted.
This was the most spoken phrase for the past 2 years. All right. Thanks, Liz. Thanks for the warm introduction. Firstly, I would like to extend my sincere thanks to all the esteemed panelists who are taking time off their busy schedule to share with us their thoughts, their experiences, and learnings from their journey to the benefit of all the audience here. And a warm welcome to all the participants. As Liz introduced, my name is Parag Kamble, and I'm a co-founder of CEO Network and managing partner of CEO Network Kenya. CEO is an advisory firm focused on international and development cooperation. It was founded in Frankfurt, Germany, and is also registered in Kenya as a local subsidiary. What is CEO? Literally, CEO means knowledge in Esperanto. CEO Network, as the name suggests, is a network of bright individuals coming from different professional backgrounds and from different parts of the world, striving to bring a fresh perspective to the old model of international and development cooperation. Before I proceed, I just wanted to check if, am I clearly audible? I just got a prompt saying that my internet is a bit unstable. Sylvia, I'm audible?
Yeah, it's good now.
All right, thank you. Yeah, so as I said, so CEO is a network of bright individuals is coming from different professional backgrounds from different parts of the world, trying to bring in like a fresh perspective to the old model of international and development cooperation. Now, international and development cooperation has always been operating in a traditional space, the conservative way, primarily due to the pressures from the donor organization, which tend to be a bit risk averse. It, however, has a power to bridge the gap between economies and deliver social impact at a large scale. Contrary to that, innovation and entrepreneurship, operates in a very vibrant space, quick changes, fast adaptation, risk-taking environment, and largely, but not always and necessarily, have driven impact through disruptive technologies introduced largely coming from the private sector. Now, aim to bring these two worlds together and work cohesively by bringing the immense value that is generated through innovation by young entrepreneurs to the world of international and development cooperation and leverage that for the social and economic impact. Now, this value proposition and positioning of CEO has resonated really well with large international organizations and is evident from the success the CEO has seen in the past 2 years. Now, one such initiative which CEO Network is embarking on is to tap into the innovation and entrepreneurial landscape in this vibrant city of Nairobi and give it a space to thrive, to learn, to grow and achieve by establishing an impact hub, a physical platform to foster collaboration between entrepreneurs, innovators, large organizations, investors, and to the general public. The event today is a step in that direction, which brings together successful entrepreneurs in the different phases of the journey, academia, investors, and is a step, as I said, in the direction to lay the foundation for establishing this global brand in our very own vibrant city of Nairobi. I will stop at that. I will hand it over to Kenny to introduce the panel that we have today for the stimulating discussion. Over to you, Kenny.
Thank you, Parag, and thank you everyone for showing up, especially panelists today. I have the honor of introducing them. I'll do the panel introductions with the help of Liz helping me with some of the slides, and therefore It'll take about a few minutes, just so you guys can get a better feel of who you're going to be listening to beyond what you've seen on the Boba platform. So I'll go through it alphabetically. First of all, we have Angela Waweru, aka Lush. She is a Yali alumni. She holds 2 degrees, one in media and another in education, teaching to be specific. She is a woman of 2 worlds, born in Kenya, bred in the UK. Her career has been one of full of twists and turns, which has tempered and refined her towards being one of the founding partners of not one, but 2 outstanding organizations, Sister Speaks Global and Heals for Paz Foundation. Sister Speaks is a female-centered events organization intent on curating safe spaces and events for women to be empowered with new skills and knowledge, providing the opportunity to connect with other like-minded women. The Heals for Paz Foundation highlights the plights faced by girls and women in marginalized communities due to period poverty, period shaming, and period taboo. Heal for Paz works on establishing sustainable projects that ensures easy access to menstrual products and facilitation to menstrual health education. Let's give her a hand. Great work. The next wonderful panelist we have is Dr. Robert Karanja. He is a biomedical scientist and development entrepreneur with 20 years of experience in STEM and development sectors. He holds a PhD in parasitology and entomology from JKUAT. As a scientist at the Kenya Medical Research Institute, KEMRI, Robert has been actively involved in the establishment of intellectual property and technology transfer office, where he discovered his passion for innovation. He contributed to the entrepreneurial ventures developing diagnostics, nutraceuticals, and phytomedicine products at KEMRI. Building on this experience, he launched and led a bio-entrepreneurship bootcamp at Strathmore University Business School for research commercialization in health and agricultural ventures. Someone is speaking. Could they stop speaking? This paved the way for his entrepreneurial career as a co-founder of Vilgrow Africa, a Pan-African business incubator and early stage investor in health and life sciences. Robert is also a co-founder and director at the African Genome Center and Consulting Limited, or TAGCC, a state-of-the-art biotechnology platform that provides genome sequencing and bioinformatics services in Nairobi. In addition, he's an active angel investor and serves on the board of several firms and organizations in Kenya and the region. Yes, and then we move on to our next panelist. Thank you. Ruhi Sutrawala has over 7 years of entrepreneurial experience in Africa, focused on growing retail, e-commerce, and helping SMEs manage the transition to e-commerce. She has represented Kenyan e-commerce landscapes across many organizations like USAID, UNCTAD, WTO, and ICC, and is passionate about using e-commerce to promote inclusiveness across the continent. She was recently awarded Woman of the Year in 2021 at the Kenyan E-Commerce Awards. Before this, she was working at Credit Suisse in India in their investment banking division and has experience across varied verticals like finance, operations, and marketing. Outstanding. And now for our next panelist, we have, you've gone too far, go back one, please. Yes, we have Wanjiru Koinange. She's a best-selling author, a restorer of libraries, and a publisher from Nairobi, Kenya. She's a co-founder at Bookbank, which is a nonprofit organization that is working on converting some of Nairobi's oldest libraries into vibrant spaces that celebrate art, information, and creativity. She's also a director at Bunk Books, a new publishing imprint that most recently published her own debut novel, The Havoc of Choice, and I hope you've all read it, as well as Lupita Nyong'o's much acclaimed children's book, Sulue. She received the 2021 Leader in Social Impact Award from WIRE, that is Women in Real Estate, and was recently named one of the continent's leading female innovators by Quartz Africa. Karibu. And finally, we have, but not least, Vava Agwenyi, a founder, chief coffeeholic at Vava Coffee, entrepreneur in several other ventures, and author of At Coffee Milk Blood. Vava's vision is to challenge the status quo and promote positive social disruption within the coffee sector. This vision comes from an inborn passion for coffee and a drive to promote the sustainable production of coffee within Kenya and the wider East African region by enhancing the traceability of high quality coffee beans produced by independent smallholder coffee farmers who work day in and day out against major obstacles and with meager resources to produce some of the world's best tasting coffee, often without an understanding or appreciation of the final fruits of their labor. It is my great pleasure that I'll hand the floor now to my partner, Sylvia, who will continue this session and basically interact with our panelists. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Kenny, for those introductions. Again, we're really pleased, just to echo what everyone is saying, we're really pleased to have the panel that we have today. I'm sure we're going to learn a lot, and it's going to be an interactive and resourceful session. So for my first question, and I want to direct this to all the panelists, Kenny has shared a lot in terms of our summaries, in terms of our achievements, amazing achievements. And we just want to hear, in addition to that, from each of you, how you started your entrepreneurship journey, just a little bit about the enterprise you run. And so we can go in alphabetical order. So perhaps we can start with Angela, and then Dr. Robert, and then Ruhi, and then Baba, and winding that off with 10. So over to you, Angela.
Hello, everyone. I'm really happy to be here. Thank you for this opportunity. My journey started with watching Sheryl Sandberg, who has written a book called Lean In and is the CEO of Facebook. Many years ago, she did an interview with Oprah, and she was talking about how she wanted to teach women how to, lean in and stop planning ahead about how they're going to get married and take a break. And I thought, oh, this is such a brilliant idea. But then I asked myself, so she's doing something for women, who's doing something for the girls? And so, and then I proceeded to pursue my second degree in teaching and education. And so I started a mentorship program in UK in my community. There was a big Kenyan community. So I started a mentorship program for girls and, trying to educate them and prepare them for life outside of education. So fast forward a few years later, I relocated back to Kenya, and with the hopes to do the same thing. It didn't start immediately, but with connecting with my two other founders, Monica Mohoya and Angela Wamboi, we had this idea about how we can bring women together and curate spaces where women can come and talk, or curate spaces where we can promote women. So doing things like the Sisters Market, which is generally a flea market, but with the idea of only supporting predominantly female-run businesses. And then from that, we started the idea of, let's do something to support the women and the girls who generally wouldn't come to our events. And what's the one thing we all have in common as women? Tends to be periods. So Monica had some heels and she wanted to give them away. And so she was like, maybe if we brought some heels from our shoe rack that we no longer wear, instead of just giving them away, why don't we ask for pads as as in exchange? So do a barter trade. So if you want my heels, I'm just going to ask you to give me some pads. So it started off as something that was just a CSR, became bigger than ourselves, was picked up by Miss World Kenya, and so was part of her she became our goodwill ambassador, championing our work. And so from then on, understanding the challenges, I did not know that there was a term called period poverty until we started supporting girls and women in regards to menstrual health. So in understanding that, and unfortunately in September 2019, there's a girl called Jacqueline from Chepcheno from Bomet County. She unfortunately sold her uniform, and instead of getting the right counsel to go and resolve the issue, she was bullied in class by her female teacher, which then allowed the classroom to tutor. I'm sure she had other ongoing issues, and perhaps that was just the straw that broke the camel's back. She, in turn, allegedly took her own life. And so for us, that was just a realization that should never be anyone's reason for ending their life. And so then we took it seriously and have been fortunate enough to continue the work, even with COVID. COVID kind of has been a blessing, and not to sound bad, but, you know, it's just made it, the fact that the poverty has exacerbated, it's made it easier to bring people on board and making them realize, you know, periods don't just go, you know, like we're going to get them till we're 50 plus. So it's an ongoing issue. So we need to fix the solution around the poverty around it, around access around it, the stigma and the taboo, because it's intersected with sexual health, early marriage, FGM. There's so many things that are intertwined in that. And so our job has been to continuing championing the challenges women face that will equate to us bridging the gap to gender equality.
Oh, wow. Thanks so much for sharing that, Angie. Very inspiring work that's carried across continents. And I love that you're still doing that today, and that you've seen that this, you know, there's a whole scope when it comes to supporting women and girls. You start with one thing, but you end up, you know, understanding the issues are interconnected and it's intersectional. So thank you so much for sharing that. I'll now invite Dr. Robert to just tell us briefly as well about how he got started. So over to you, Dr. Robert.
Thank you so much, Sylvia. Maybe, I don't know whether I'm alone on this, but for me, I just discovered I have a medical condition whereby I'm literally allergic to poverty. And the idea of how do you become allergic to poverty, it's quite simple. What I discovered is we have, when you look at Africa, we tend to have the worst health statistics. We have the shortest life expectancy. Maternal mortality, neonatal mortality, you know, HIV. In fact, the only place we've done better than the world is COVID, which in itself, even scientists like me are still going to be scratching our head maybe 5 years down the road. So why do I say I'm allergic to poverty? What happens is that for a continent like ours, about 1.4 billion souls that live in Africa, we are perceived to be so poor that the industry, the pharmaceutical industry, actually does not serve us. And so what happens is that you see drugs, vaccines, you know, exactly what we're seeing in the COVID scenario right now, where we are doing basically what about 2% of our population is vaccinated, whereas other countries are hitting 70%. It's not that we don't count. It's just simply that the industry is a for-profit machine. It actually goes to where they get the premium profits, which is not us, and so we are kind of left behind. And so when you look at the health sector for Africa, what you literally see is a neglected market. And so I had to ask myself, even as I was trying to solve the problems for very old issues like malaria, a lot of these neglected diseases, schistosomiasis, leishmaniasis, hydatid disease. Why are we struggling with this? There are countries that got rid of malaria without a single malaria intervention program. They just simply had their population become a middle-income population. And some of these poverty-related diseases simply disappeared. If you take somebody out of the Madare slums or from Kibera or wherever, a lot of those diseases that are just a factor of the environment, lack of sanitation, lack of toilets, lack of clean access to clean water, they typically disappear. So my entry point into entrepreneurship, into innovation, was really driven by understanding that focusing on just a disease alone is really sort of treating the symptoms and not really getting to the root issue. And that the minute we understand how to flip that conversation so that our health challenges can actually become an opportunity, a business opportunity, then we can actually literally change this narrative and be able to transform the health sector. And I think it's not just the health sector, it's literally pretty much all sectors across Africa, where the underlying issue is poverty. So how do we build local value chains? How do we create local wealth? How do we create generational wealth? Started becoming more and more a huge issue that I'm really very passionate about. And so that I don't talk too much, I'll stop there and allow the rest of the allow the rest of the points to come out later on. But suffice it to say, we need to change the paradigm. We do need to build wealth. We are dying because we are poor. We're not getting vaccines because we're poor. We're not getting drugs because we're poor. So to me, let's understand, how do we solve those problems? Let's create local innovation, local products. Let's and what we do at Buildgrow is really promote two things: social entrepreneurship, and the second one is frugal innovation. If an X-ray machine has to cost $20,000, how can I get an X-ray machine that can do exactly the same thing at maybe $2,000? Doing more with less, and making sure that we build business models that can actually speak to the bottom of the economic pyramid. So that is my small story in a nutshell, and I'm happy to be here. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Karanja, for sharing that. Interestingly, something you have in common with Angie is that as you begin by solving one problem, you realize like there's a whole set of interconnected problems. And so maybe what you had originally envisioned would be a solution. You realize there's more that we can do. And I'm so glad to have you on the panel and to share some of that, what you're doing with the rest of the entrepreneurs we have today. So thank you for that. I'll then hand it over now to Ruhi to share with us a little bit about her story. So over to you, Ruhi.
Thank you. Thank you, Sylvia. Hi, everyone. I'm Ruhi Sutarwala. Very excited to be here. And thank you, Sayo, for the CEO, for the opportunity to be here today. My e-commerce journey started somewhere in 2017, wherein I opened a very small little store on Jumia, with shaky hands and not those, super high quality pictures and such. And I just, thought that probably being a new mom, I thought e-commerce was one, easy way to sort of get my business going to places, and especially because at that point in time, Jumia was picking up. I think somewhere between 2016, 2017 is where we saw a lot of growth in Jumia, a lot of people adapting to e-commerce. So luckily in 6 months, our operations grew really well. In 2017, we were awarded Vendor of the Year with Jumia. And I was surprised, honestly, because I thought that we are doing like simple operations, just like running operations, making sure the stocks are present with us, making sure the prices are competitive. So Jumia and the management team at Jumia and us, we got into the discussion to see what are we doing differently to put us on the top of the chart, which are the big organizations. Like I think at that time, we had bigger brands like Maybelline, Brookside, Ramson's, Hotpoint, everyone selling on Jumia, but somewhere they were going wrong. So this discussion led to, for us to look deeper into our business and understand, is it something that we can scale? Is it something where we, as a solution, we can offer to other businesses and see if we can grow them as well? Is it like, is there a formula? So to understand that, I went to Thailand to study e-commerce, how they operate, different marketplaces, different service providers, and see what they're doing differently so that they're able to take their e-commerce from, say, 1 or 2% of their GDP to 18% of their GDP today. So Thailand is a brilliant example where 1 in every 5 products sold is bought online. So with that aim, I studied the e-commerce in Thailand pretty intently, and then came back here with a lot of ideas. I was like, wow, there's so much to improve. There's so much that we can do. So when I came back, Jumia introduced me to a few vendors, and we started looking into their business to see what we could change. But at that point, as a consultant, when I joined their businesses, it felt like me being a professor, super excited to teach, walking into an absolutely empty classroom. So we realized that I didn't have much audience for all the ideas that I had. But of course, we could clearly see there was a need. It was a time where kind of Nakumat was going down. A lot of supermarket chains were shaky. So e-commerce could have actually rescued so many businesses from like cash crunch, credit crunch, and such. So I decided, okay, single-handedly, it'll be too difficult to drive this change. So that's when Emerse came into picture. We, got together a few passionate people about e-commerce, started looking into the businesses as teams, and now offer the solutions to businesses in a way that you don't need to change. Whatever you cannot handle, give it to us. We'll handle the operations end to end for you. And then, of course, things were good for 2 years. We were slowly getting our clients, but still, e-commerce was not something people were looking at as like a primary solution to the supermarkets being closed or them not having enough number of retail channels. Well, COVID changed that. We all know that, like how any and everyone who's never tried e-commerce was now willing to try it. So after being a service industry, being in service industry rather, and being like an outsourcing solution for processes that people cannot handle, we realized that the demand for our services grew tenfold during COVID. And so we had to now look at the way to automate our solution. So we automate the solution rather that we have internally with our company and what we offer to the customers. So then we embarked on this new journey of hiring a whole new division of the tech team, and now who's working now to automate a lot of processes, intelligence, everything that we've learned in our 2 years to now put it into products and scale it up to solve problems of many more vendors and in a cost-effective way, which brings us to the Emerse that is there today. So yeah, that's about my journey, Sylvia.
All right, thanks so much, Ruhi. I've enjoyed listening to that. You're right. This is one of the businesses that thrived during COVID. So I'm pretty excited to pick your brain a little bit later on how now you're starting to systemize what you learned. But thanks so much for sharing. We'll now go on to Vava just to hear a little bit about her journey as well.
Thanks, Sylvia, and it's a pleasure for me to be here and join the rest of the panelists in this, I would say, very interesting and important discussion, especially in terms of what could have happened and has happened to a lot of entrepreneurs, not just social entrepreneurs, but I would say the whole entrepreneurial landscape, and not just in Kenya, but I would say worldwide. So I got into coffee out of curiosity, and actually out of drinking a ton of coffee when I was a student in Canada. And because I would say asking a question after the other sort of led me down this path of, just discovering how a commodity, and personally, I've never looked at coffee as a commodity as such until I learned how the whole market works. But for me, because I've grown up knowing coffee producers, like my grandmother and other coffee producers, I always would associate coffee with, a specific farmer. So I would say being a student out there and just looking at how coffee was consumed on a daily in the Western world got me asking questions around the socioeconomic imbalances, because say sitting at a place like Starbucks or Tim Hortons, I would see, beautifully packaged coffee beans, and sort of how disconnected the story of the producer was. Like you talk to producers in Kenya and a lot of them don't even know where their coffee ends up. They don't even know what happens to the coffee when it leaves the farm. All they are subject to is sort of going to the coffee factory and maybe getting a slip saying, okay, you're gonna get paid this much, or the market is bad and that kind of thing. So I actually studied, I did a math degree, actuarial science and statistics, and so I've always been like a numbers person, always fascinated by what story numbers can tell. And then looking at the supply and demand equation in coffee, I was just like, this just doesn't make sense. And then looking historically at how coffee started being traded in Kenya, for example, and the systems and structures and the policies that had been set into place by the colonialists, I sort of, at that point, I think just when I was doing my undergrad, I sort of made the decision quietly. It was a personal, quiet decision because I couldn't tell my parents about this, that one day I wanted to start my own enterprise that would actually work at grassroots level with producers to just be an advocate for producers, but also make money. I never wanted to do an NGO type of business. I've always been that the solution for Africa is not the NGO way, but learning to sort of get populations to know how to put money in their hands and to trade. So very early on, started looking into how best to sort of articulate the sort of business I wanted to put together, and got sort of like sort of a rude shock, because I'm like coming back, making the decision first of all to come back to Kenya was a tough one. It was not a very popular decision with the rest of my family. So of course, got kind of chastised for giving up opportunities in the Western world to come sort of struggle. As I was told, what is this? I mean, you don't come from a farming family, and you could have gotten a great job in Toronto. What is this? You're throwing your life away. So I remember when I started like actively hitting the ground, I just started with a group of like two students from Strathmore, and I said, the first thing we have to do is collect data and just find out what are the real issues on the ground with producers. What are they not happy about? Long story short, like just to cut a couple of pieces that happened, there's I'm glad that I was naive when I jumped into this sector, because had I known how tough it is, I don't think I would have pursued this, because I think sometimes ignorance is bliss in a sense, because this is scary stuff, like starting a business and you're up against multinationals, because the Kenyan coffee industry is run by, I would say, 5 to 6 huge multinationals that are the ones that are actively and aggressively trading every week in terms of huge numbers and buying a ton of coffee. But then I said, you know what, I don't have to, my business model does not have to copy, and I never wanted to be like a Dormans. I never wanted to be like, a Kenya Coffee or whatever. I just wanted to sort of make a mark and have sort of to prove, first of all, to other, be it young Kenyans or to my own government, that they need to make space for local Kenyans who want to get into the coffee industry. We can do it, especially when we understand what the Western world needs in the coffee sector, because we don't consume coffee in this country. And when we look at the number of smallholder producers we have in Kenya alone, which is like 700,000 smallholder farmers growing coffee, a lot of these are also producers who grow other crops. And when we say agriculture is the backbone of, a lot of economies in Africa, that's the truth, because we all eat. We all have to eat, and COVID even proved, the more so the urgency of everyone being sort of self-sustaining in terms of just growing your own food or even knowing where your food is coming from. I mentioned this aspect of diversification in farming because just to show how crucial producers are in our lives, and how crucial it is for each of us as Kenyans to start paying attention to what we drink, what we consume, and supporting your local farmer, because only in that way will we ever have a voice, and even being able to negotiate prices with the Western world, or putting our foot down when certain terms and conditions are given, like certifications and stuff like that. So I never knew how tough it was to run a business and even sustain it. For me, I was driven by passion and a dream, and that's what's gotten me here. But of course, I'm accountable to investors, I'm accountable to producers. So of course, like, in as much as one side of me is that whole storytelling, lovely producers, I taste coffee for a living, and I'm a certified Q grader. So one thing that I really enjoy is traveling across Kenya and across Africa, just tasting coffees from different parts and attaching a story to it, but more so just the technical aspects of coffee that go along with it. So over time, I think something that I've discovered, which I've tried to impart to both coffee producers that we work with and young people that I come across who are interested in the industry, is just how vast the coffee world is. There's a ton of opportunity in terms of entrepreneurship and other employment opportunities, which even as a country we've not pursued. Of course, there's over time I've doubled in making positive noise around policies that need to change to favor local traders, because some of the policies that exist really don't make sense. They were set up by the British to favor the British, and some of those things just need to be appended. So over time, I've come across just how to strengthen what the Vava coffee story is by learning from others within the industry. My experience working in Latin America as well and in Tanzania has also sort of opened my eyes in just how similar we are in the struggle and the learnings of how advanced maybe perhaps the coffee sector is in Latin America, and simple things we can take and copy and paste in Kenya to help our producers. Over time, of course, given what the regulations are and everything, we've had to, as a company, also choose a certification that speaks to who we are and what we do. So we are a B Corp certified company, the first B Corp certified coffee company owned by a woman on the continent. So that's something I'll brag about. A certification that's not easy, but also the reason we chose that one was because it spoke to who we are, with the things that we've worked so hard to talk to producers about: environmental friendly farming methods, community, like just building community. I'm very passionate about just giving back to my community, which is why I also came back to Kenya, because I would have chosen the easy route in staying out there in Canada or Europe and watching from the back burner and making noise. But I chose to jump in and sometimes get humiliated in the struggle of being an entrepreneur, which I think a lot of people don't understand what goes into entrepreneurship in Kenya. So I think I'm glad that a session like this is being held, because I think we are in a society that really needs to be educated on what goes into actually starting your own enterprise, choosing a model like being a social enterprise and running with it and sticking to it. And I know I'm going, maybe Sylvia, I think I'm going a little bit over time, so I'm going to cut it here and continue later as the questions come in. Thank you.
All right. Thanks so much, Vava, for authentically sharing your story. And I think your story will relate to a lot of us who are in this room about starting with a passion, starting with a dream, and then now how sustaining that dream, I think, and yeah, just kudos for being a change maker and a pioneer in so many ways. So thanks for sharing that. I'll now switch over quickly to Wanjiru. So maybe if you can keep it at not more than 3 minutes, again, just sharing with us how you started and a little bit about your enterprise. Over to you.
Thank you, Sylvia. I'm honored to be here and to hear from all my fellow panelists about their journeys. I walked into the Macmillan Memorial Library about 8 years ago with my co-founder, Angela Washuka. At the time, we were both looking for a space to hold a literary festival. She was working at Kwani Trust, which was one of the most progressive publishers at the time, and I was coming in sporadically to help her produce her festivals. So you walk into Macmillan, it's a 90-year-old building, 90 years old this year, and it looks like it hasn't been touched in then maybe about, 75 years, 80 years, and it just didn't look like a library should look, like in a city as vibrant as Nairobi. So we obviously didn't use it for that event, but it kind of stuck with us. We kept wondering, why would a place where the city's intellectual knowledge lives, why would it look like that? What does it say about how we choose or how we treat our knowledge, how we treat our public spaces for a library that's significant, Nairobi's oldest, to look like it was on the verge of falling apart? So needless to say, we went away. We did other things. I went off to grad school. I wrote my first book. I came back to Kenya. But when I came back to Kenya, after spending 2.5 years seated in libraries, using the library almost 8 hours a day at some point, it's like I looked around and I'm just like, hang on, where are the libraries? Like, what happened? What happened to the libraries in Kenya? Because I went to libraries when I was growing up in the 90s in Nairobi. I went to the Upper Hill one, all of these vibrant spaces that we kind of went to access information. And at the same time, I then got commissioned by the Commonwealth Writers to write about my city in whatever way that I wanted, because at the time I was a freelance writer. And it gave me the chance to go back to Macmillan and to spend, I want to say, about a month sitting there, listening to the stories from the staff members, from the people who'd worked there, the people who'd used the library and understood why a space like that would look the way it did. And that article that I wrote in 2015 then became the seed for the formation of BookBank. BookBank, as Kenny said, is a social impact firm that exists solely to restore public libraries. We see libraries as being spaces where people can come and get anything that they need. We actually call them palaces for the people, and have created a podcast about the process of restoring libraries and converting them into these palaces. But the first challenge was convincing the County of Nairobi that we were better custodians for these spaces than they were. And that took us about 18 months to 2 years of negotiating, because we also didn't really know what we were doing. We just wanted to renovate a library. We didn't know how to. I'm not an architect or a construction worker. Washuka, my co-founder, was a publisher, but it just didn't feel enough to donate books and walk away. So 18 months later, the first of its kind agreement with a cultural organization was signed with the Nairobi County government. And that gave us a permission and the mandate to begin to restore the Macmillan Memorial Library in Nairobi, in the center of Nairobi, but also 2 of its smaller branches in Eastlands and in Kaloleni. But the first step before we did anything is realize how little data there was about libraries and literacy and education statistics, and stuff that wasn't necessarily pegged on the curriculum or the syllabus. So we had to ask a lot of questions. We spent time in the library speaking to users, asking them, what do you want from the spaces? Why do you even come here? There's no Wi-Fi, there are no toilets, the collections are 90 years old. Why are you coming here? And they told us what they wanted. And we used that information to begin to make a case to fundraise for these spaces. Our agreement with the county is that we manage all the financial fundraising and the management of these finances once we bring them in. We manage the research attached to the libraries. We manage all of the programs attached to the library. And the programs were important for me as a writer because I needed a space where artists could thrive, a space where there was nothing expected from you as an artist other than your work and the desire to showcase. And we wanted the libraries to become those spaces because we know we don't have enough theaters, we don't have enough galleries, we don't have enough showcase spaces for art, and which is why we kind of struggle with the question of what Kenyan culture is, because we haven't created spaces where this can be celebrated. And when we do, we don't ask the right questions about these spaces. So fast forward to 2018, we do all of the research. 2019, we do a lot of artistic programs to bring people back into the library to kind of begin to shift what libraries mean to Nairobi residents. And last year during the pandemic, we began the architectural restoration of the first 2 branches, which we've now completed, but also began to diversify how the organization earned income, because both my co-founder and I have spent all of our lives working in the arts and culture space. And that often means that we spent our lives fundraising for our initiatives, and we don't want to fundraise for the rest of our lives. We want to create things that sustain themselves, because as Vava said, grants and aid is not the way to go. So with that inspiration, we then set up our publishing imprint, which serves several purposes for me as an author and someone who wants to spend her life writing. It makes sense to create the thing that then presents my books to the world, but also for other writers, because we're going to build the spaces, the library spaces, but we're going to also need to churn in fresh, engaging, relevant content, and it exists in the city, but the biggest gap we saw is not the writers and not the desire to create work. It's the desire to get, it's the barrier between getting this work to the readers. And in a second kind of phase, the publishing house then allowed us to create a revenue earning machine for the trust, so that any profits from the publishing were then channeled back to the nonprofit that does the library restoration work. In the last 2 years, we've been really successful. We've published some bestsellers. We've renovated 2 libraries that are absolutely gorgeous and that are my personal pride and joy. And we succeeded in most things that we do because we rely on data. We don't make assumptions. We ask questions. We disrupt everything. And we've changed lots of lives so far doing that. I'll leave it at that for now.
Yeah, thank you so much, Anjiri, for sharing your story. You actually make me think like, oh, I want to go to a library now. Yeah, and so I think you bringing that artistic and cultural lens in terms of being able to see how can we bring libraries to the 21st century? How can we make them relevant and modern and places that people want to go to? That's really inspiring, and I'm really looking forward to hearing the rest of your story as you go along. So yeah, I think now we all have an idea about what each of the panelists is doing. And so I just want to mention that we will have time for questions and answers. So if there are questions, as you're hearing the stories of the entrepreneurs, as you're hearing our panelists speak, if there are questions that are coming to mind, please feel free to put them in the chat. My colleague Liz is collecting those questions and we'll be able to voice them out and have them answered later on in today's event. And so for my next question, I actually want to address this or direct this to Angela and Baba. So, you know, different kinds of businesses and you realize, like, you know, you start something with your friend and you realize, I think as Angie you had put it, this is bigger than what you had, you know, what you had started out. So my question is, at what point did you realize as you were setting up your business that you need external funding so that you can get to the next level? And so just to clarify, by funding here, it could either be grant capital or, you know, like donor funding, or it could be like, you know, someone gives you money and to get a stake in your business, equity kind of funding, just whatever kind of funding. If you could just talk a little bit about when you realized you need this funding and what kind of funding you were seeking for. So over to you, Angela, and then we'll briefly hear from Vava as well.
Thank you, Sylvia. I mean, I think the reality checked in when COVID hit. So we'd had, just for those maybe who've come in, so I run two organizations concurrently. So the Sister Speaks Global obviously predominantly focuses on events, and that was the concept. And then COVID hit and we'd done just a really amazing big event where we had Sister Speaks Talk combined with the Sisters Market. And so we had all these huge grand plans like everybody else of what the things that we were going to do. And then just after we've done the event, 2 weeks later, it was boom bash, you know, the world is closed. And at the same time with Hills for Pads, we had figured out that it's great distributing to all these different places because we've done 10 counties so far, but we needed to concentrate on doing a more sustainable project to figure out if that's going to be the solution that maybe even other organizations can adapt and can also inform on research and policy within the space of menstrual health. So our idea was to solve the solution where studies show that 1 in 10 African children in sub-Saharan Africa miss school because of lack of access to periods and period products. So we wanted to work with the school, and you know, I had already figured out the project that we were gonna do. We're going to start it off I think towards the end of March. And then and just see if we ensure that these girls in this primary school have access to period products and also have access to education around menstrual health, and which can also be extended to, so as a mixed school, to the boys as well, teaching them the responsibility of puberty. Do we start to see the change also in behavior when it comes to period taboo and period shaming? And then COVID hit. So for me, for my team as well, I must say when COVID hit, it was just like, oh, okay, back to the drawing board. Now what do we do as Sister Speaks? We predominantly model was around events. So now it had to be about using the digital space, but that wasn't going to bring the money. How do we go about it? And then the period issue was increasing even further because of the fact that people weren't able to work. What was a low-income family became a no-income family. Am I going to buy tomatoes and rice, or am I going to buy pads? So, you know, and then you find girls are choosing solutions such as we've had situations where, you know, they're transacting sex for pads. And so that realization was, we have to figure out, how do we, these problems are not going away, how do we keep working? And so not relying on public donations. Thank God last year, funny enough, we raised a lot more money than we did the year before, but through public donations. But what I would say, I think the consistency, working with what we had and partnering with other collaborating with other companies as well that are doing the same. So, there was a time where we couldn't move around county to county. So finding ways to help other organizations by providing them the resources that we already had. So I'd say what has helped us continue to, I guess, to accomplish more is realizing we need to move from seeking a lot of public support, and also maybe creating projects where that like for Hills for Pads that are adoptable. So there's a company that needs a CSR, they don't know what to do. This is the idea that we have, and this is how much it's going to cost you, and we'll be responsible for running it, but you as a team can come and be a part of it. So changing that model with Sister Speaks, we started to think about like selling merchandise to continue with the conversation around female empowerment. And we've been fortunate enough to also have a digital radio show where we continue with that story of sharing stories and of women who are doing grand things, like Anjiro, Vava, Ruhi, sharing those kind of stories and continuing that conversation. And I think it's definitely been more difficult, but I know how hard it is to say be consistent, but work with what you have. And I think from that, this year has been the best year, because we remained consistent, we no longer have to like beg, steal, or whatever. Companies and corporates and organizations are now recognizing our work and are coming to us. And like I said, COVID has been a blessing in regards to it's no longer as difficult to say that we need to support Girls with Pads.
Yeah, thanks so much, Angie, for sharing that. In your story, like, I've gotten quite a number of aha moments there. Like, if we want support, like, how do we then position the work we're doing in a way that will be accepted by others, like with the Heals for Pads story? You also made the migration, and I think I've heard this coming through the panel that I'm hearing COVID has been an opportunity for innovation, and I'm glad that you've gone ahead and taken that and been able to still see, your vision come to life, even if it was not in the original format that you had it. So yeah. Thanks for sharing that. And then I'll go on to Vava, again, just sharing when we went about our organizations, when we realized we need external funding to be able to get to the next level. So Vava, over to you.
For us, it was pretty much from the get-go, because there were no savings or whatever. I was starting from scratch, and I needed to start pitching to whoever was interested to come in, either as a partner or because literally coming in from a foreign country to Kenya with no assets, no nothing, I had to start getting people interested in my idea. So I think from the onset, I started learning how to put together this story. And the first person I had to pitch to was my mother, because she's like, I'm not just giving you money, and I'm not just going to go get you a loan. So business plan, blah, blah, blah. If you're going to, this were her words, if you're going to go throw your life away, use some of your skills to give me a business proposal. So, which is what I did. So I would say right from the onset, I've been using other people's money to sort of until we started generating income. And I would say the coffee industry being very capital intensive, we couldn't even start in the export side of the market, which was ideally where we wanted to start off. We had to, retail in Kenya is damn expensive as well, but I had no choice but to start tapping into what the retail side had for us here in Kenya. And that meant looking into getting packaging equipment and just hefty asset investment and all kinds of investment, which at that point, I was also just learning the ropes. So did a lot of research, got my numbers, and then so first started off with bank loans, which ideally I would say the financial systems in Africa and in Kenya per se are not set up to help entrepreneurs grow and thrive. So I learned early on to avoid banks, but of course at some point you have no choice but to go back to a bank and get your overdraft and things like that. And then just roping in whoever could listen in. And so I pitched not just to my mother at the time who, gave me some capital. And then there were a bunch of friends, people who had their own chamas who would listen to me and invest. And then over time, because there's like a mentality in Kenya where people don't quite appreciate entrepreneurship. They think it's quick cash and they want to get their returns and walk out. So over time, I had to buy out people or get new partners on board. So I started looking more into the social enterprise, what we call impact investors. So over time, just articulating how the model has changed from, you being a startup to, I would say an SME, but also, I struggle with that definition a bit because in Kenya it means one thing and in another place it means something else. So we are like Vava Coffee is sort of like your missing middle type of company that you're not too big and you're not too small. So you're right there in the middle and you struggle to kind of get your appropriate investor. But generating some income from what we could do in terms of local sales kind of helped us get from one thing to another. We had a good repertoire of clients, but unfortunately retail is what it is. Supermarkets collapse, they go with your money, and then you have to start from scratch. By the time we got into the export market, which was like literally 4 years ago, and the company's been around for 12 years, and because when you're trading in the export side, you have to have cash ready in your bank. Like there's no going to buy coffee and then because by law you have to pay producers within 7 days, and it's not small amounts of money you're looking at. Over time, I would say like COVID got a lot of us thinking around like survival. And I would say had it not been for some clients who have had to lean on to sort of restructure how we finance the company. So using my clients to help restructure our financials, how we operate financially, but more so just learning how to, other than have a local bank finance, just someone else out there who has rates that are more affordable and they act as your bank and they understand the coffee trade. Because I think the worst thing is to get money from institutions or individuals who don't understand how your industry works. Then you're just, it's like 10 times more trouble than you want. So to answer your question, for us, it was early on and we've been, every other day we need money. So you hustle and you either pitch, we're in the process of pitching. Again, we had to sort of take a break for a while, but, back at it because we constantly are needing money. You're trading, so you need money, and we don't have the luxury of having a Swiss bank bankrolling us. So we have to, be out there looking for money.
Yeah. Thank you, Baba. I really do like how real you are with that. The hustle is real, right? And, there's something you mentioned towards the end about, get money from a financier that understands your trade. Someone who understands, for example, how the cycle works. Like you start by, you have to supply first before you get paid. And these are the legal requirements. So I think that's a really important point just to emphasize, because we have different types of entrepreneurs in this room. And, you've point blank, you've mentioned the fact that, even with banks, that may not be, they're not favorable for entrepreneurs. So maybe that's not the go-to solution, so to speak. All right, moving on to the next question. And for this question, I'm inviting brief remarks from Wanjiro, Ruhi, and Dr. Karanja. And so thinking about your fundraising journeys, right? So Wanjiro and Ruhi, this has been as entrepreneurs, and Dr. Karanja, this has been as an investor, actually. What are some of the things that you've learned and would advise entrepreneurs who are here today, and even entrepreneurs who are joining us live stream? What should you encourage them or advise them to do differently? So maybe we can start with you, Wanjiru, then Ruhi, then Dr. Karanja.
Thank you. So the first thing I think is to diversify not only who you get money from. Besides doing, we realized also to come and learn and find community. But then as we began to manage these spaces, we're like, oh my goodness, kids are coming to the libraries completely hungry. So we can't have the kids sit down and engage with any kind of programming you're having if they're starving. So then you have to figure out, how do we feed kids that come to the library? And that opens you up to like a different kind of pockets of grants. And we discovered that, okay, we old collections, some of them that go back to the 1800s, that have never been digitized, that are sitting in a moldy basement, kind of disappearing, and are probably the only versions of these collections that we have. Where, like, if we make the point then to digitize this work, you qualify for a whole bunch of other grants. So we not only diversify, ask for money for our work as possible, and then raise for those things. We get foundations, which is the cultural foundations, organizations that are kind of built to grant money to social impact organizations. We get money from corporates, which we haven't had much luck with in Kenya, by the way. And I hope someone on this call has had better luck with corporate Kenya, because we definitely haven't. And then there's individuals, which I think is probably one of the most overlooked stream of fundraising, because the thing about Kenya is that everybody is a giver. Everybody has that cousin, that auntie, that niece that you're putting through school. Funerals happen, and you have to contribute towards that. Weddings happen, you're contributing towards that. There's always a committee happening. It's very difficult to contact Kenyan to now donate philanthropically when they have all the other pressures. And the thing to do is, once you convince them they have to have a channel that's as easy as subscribing to Netflix. Do it once, forget about it, and move on. And that's what we've really worked on doing, because we will need to raise money for public spaces for a long time until we get kind of like national budget allocated to them. And with corporate Kenya kind of being the weakest, that individuals would be people who can give us funding, and that hasn't failed us yet. We have what we like to call Nairobi's most glamorous gala event that happens in December every year, and that raises us money for the library work. We require our board members to either find money or donate money from their pocket. So everybody has a target every year. You give or you get it from somewhere, and it's part of the requirements for joining the board of Bookburn. So you have to diversify. Another thing is to communicate impacts and do it really quickly. I do not like to write tons and tons of words. Even if I'm a writer, I save my writing for fiction. But when it comes to reporting, I think about what funders have to go through every day and the number of reports they have to read. So if we can give them a podcast about what we're doing, we'll give them a podcast. We maybe have almost 40 videos now, short videos that tell you in 3 minutes what we've done over a year. And funders love it. They love to just, and it's quick, it's very shareable, it's very engaging. Our annual reports are 1 page long infographics, just like what we've done in a year, and people really respond to that because it communicates impacts quickly. And it's also a really good piece of product to have in your archive, because another thing about your work as entrepreneurs is the desire to at least for us, to document every single thing. We probably do this a bit too much, because there's nothing that happens that we don't have a photographer at, or we don't have a recording of, because as you're building these things so hard and fast, you kind of forget how hard it was and how you had to shapeshift so many times. But having these records to go back to, you kind of be like, oh yeah, we did that way 2 years ago, let's try that again, or let's try and do it differently. So you've got to document everything, and your funders will really thank you. And then finally, I would say to push back as much as possible. We all know that most of the funding coming into this country isn't coming from local givers. And so you're having people coming from outside giving us money, and with their own terms. And one of my least favorite terms is people saying we'll pay for the work but not for the people. And I'm like, who's gonna do the work? You don't pay the people, who's gonna do the work? So with funders, we're constantly pushing back at the percentages around. You can't put more than 30% as operational costs, so you can't do some of those things, because it just don't work. In a country like Kenya, where we have so many unemployed, your biggest cost should be people, because people then move things and get the work happening. And the reason why we've been able to work so hard and fast and do a great amount of work in a short amount of time is because we prioritize funding for people, because then your stuff runs quicker, you can communicate impacts quicker, and you can grow quicker.
Yeah. Wow, thanks so much for sharing that, Manjiru. Being in the development space, I hear you on that, pushing back on the terms, right? And I think we have to be confident in the, believe in our business, believe in our products, our services, to be able to have that space to push back. So thanks for sharing that. Really good points that you brought there. I love the idea of board members bringing in money, and also making it easy for people to send you money, an M-Pesa link, a pay bill or a till number, a PayPal link, something, just to make it, to reduce the barriers of people being able to contribute the work if we are raising donation kind of funding. And so I'm going to just pass it on to Ruhi to, again, also share with us what she do differently, her lessons learned in raising capital. Over to you, Ruhi.
Thank you, Sylvia. So I'll just probably, before I begin my answer, let me clarify that so far we've not raised funds so far. I mean, we are in the process of raising funds, but in the past 2 years, we pretty much worked on our profits, worked with our clients, worked with, referrals to grow our businesses pretty much organically. And it's been quite a journey, I would say. So I started my business with just like $500 in my bank account and kind of working in a quick rotational cycle. I feel for a lot of people who are wanting to start their businesses these days, a lot of them want to do it as a side hustle. You would be working at having a cushy corporate job or, a cushy job, and then you want to try out something, a small idea, get together with, a group of friends and try it, which is fine. I think each one to his own and each one to their financial stability in starting a particular business. But still, initial funding should not be hindrance to your business idea if you completely believe in it. So what I would sort of give as a recommendation to people who are wanting to start their businesses or at a very early stage of starting their business is to prove their model and is to prove their idea, however, on a small scale, right? Like, I think one of the major points, which I think as an investor, maybe Dr. Karanja could enlighten us more on that, but one thing that investors look at is the scalability of the idea, right? And proving this does not require a lot of capital coming in from pots and going into the business. If you're able to prove it on a small scale and then grow it bigger, it's the idea that works and it's the team that works. So, and luckily, I mean, because, sorry, I think my internet connection is slightly unstable. Can you still hear me?
We can now. Yeah.
Okay, great. Yeah, so I think my takeaway is to start small, prove the model, reach out to the investors. And I think one thing that, sorry, I think my network is low. I'm not sure if you can hear me still, Sylvia.
I think it's okay if you switch off your video just to save on the bandwidth.
Let me. Great. Can you hear me now? Is it better?
Yeah, that is better.
Great. All right. So, yeah, I mean, so it's my advice to investors who do not have a big, not investor, rather, entrepreneurs who do not have a big bank balance. It's to start small, prove the model. And I think one thing that they should do differently is not be patient in raising the funds. Yes, to start the process of raising the funds. If they feel the idea is strong, they have a strong team, a model that can work, they should really actively have some team members dedicated to the fundraising process. So yeah, that's my advice to the new entrepreneurs.
All right, thanks so much for sharing that, Ruhi. You've mentioned something I'm a big believer of in starting lean. Just doing what you need to do to prove that you work before investing a lot of money, and we don't even know if the product or service is going to work. So thanks for sharing that. And I think it's harder when you're, you're everything in your business. How do you then dedicate, a resource to be able to raise funds? But I think as the organization grows, that's really key to be able to have someone who wakes up, whether we call them business development, growth manager, whatever, to be able to do that. And just also to bring a point I was thinking about that Angie had raised much earlier, is also about partnerships. Partnerships is a way, it's not exactly raising money, it's raising in kind, but finding people who believe in your vision, who can support, even though that's not money. That's also, I think, one way, even as Angie was sharing, they're able to continue their work during COVID. So that's another key point I thought would be good to emphasize. And so on this question, let's now go to the last panelist, and that is Dr. Karanja. Please do share with us your insights, especially from an investor lens.
Okay, thank you so much, Sylvia. And I think I've really enjoyed listening to the entrepreneurial journeys because I think it resonates very strongly with me. So when you're talking of investment from the investor side, we always say, honestly, especially for early stage investment, it's really mostly about the entrepreneur. Yes, we do a lot of due diligence. We look at the spreadsheets, the fund, unit economics, and all that. But ultimately, we feel it's literally making a bet on the entrepreneur, and I think that's the biggest thing to pick up on in terms of how do we end up investing. There are three kinds of capital available to startups within our ecosystem. There's typically debt. Then you have the diluting capital. So this is capital that will be converted to shares, so it's a convertible note or an equity play or safes. And we also have non-diluting capital, where we actually get grants. And this is, either you do business competitions, there's a cash prize, or you're working with enterprise support organizations, and they're being able to provide some small pre-seed and seed capital to kind of help you go out there, validate the market, validate your business model. So that's the first thing to know. Then the second part is to note there's an hierarchy of funding. So I think a lot in terms of value chains. And so when it comes to funding, it's also good to appreciate that we have different kinds of funders across an entire continuum. And I think you've heard the story of a lot of entrepreneurs, and I'm no different, that we actually typically would start with either savings, then you go to family, friends, and fools, as we say. And then you also have the angel investors, then you have the venture capital, then you have the private equity. And that is the norm. So your own savings, and it's interesting listening to like Vava, and her situation is really very true. A lot of us start off with zero. We don't even have savings. And when I think about entrepreneurship for us in Kenya, in Africa, especially within that context of the hierarchy of funding, I think there's so much work to be done. If I look at savings, first of all, we have a very poor saving culture. I think globally, if I also think about what is the gross savings as a percentage of the GDP, for the global gross savings, it's roughly at about 25%. You come to Sub-Saharan Africa, it falls to about 18 to 20%. You come to Kenya, it's 8%. So that tells you straight away we are struggling in terms of the very early stages of funding. Then you come to the 3 Fs. So this is where either you need to have that rich uncle, very wealthy grandma, somebody who can give you a helping hand. And it's very interesting. We don't have great data for Africa, but when I look at the data for like North America, it's quite insightful. So you see the average net worth for a white family is somewhere around $171,000. You go to black families, it falls to around $17,000. Massive wealth inequity. When you look at the data we have, I think the closest I come is South Africa, where again, it's a comparison of black and white. I don't know why we don't do black versus black, but anyway, so South Africa, which is the closest we get, is at around $4,000. So we're talking of net worth, average net worth. So where do you get the funding for these 3 Fs from? And it's a major challenge for us as we're starting off. We are under-resourced, we're under-capitalized, but we are working with really big ideas. And so you start seeing that journey of, something that you'd expect a startup in Canada, like for Vava, to start off and make a lot of traction. It takes 12 years in to be able to do what a typical startup ought to be able to do in terms of validating the market, playing on the export side, and building this relationship with investors. And it's also a major challenge to investors because the capacity for you to be able to absorb capital really matters. So typically when you're building startups, there's 2 ways of thinking about your business. You need to understand, are you building a business for profit? Or are you building a business to maximize on market value? And then the second question is, what's your game plan to being able to achieve that? How do you demonstrate that traction in order to align with the right capital? And I think the second thing is then being able to actually tell the story. I think we are all by nature forced to become great storytellers. Innovation and storytelling, because you have this vision, this dream in your head that nobody else has, and they're looking at you thinking, until you say the library needs to be fixed, and who are you, where has it been done before? You start getting these questions, and they're coming from your support network, they're coming from strangers, they're coming from the people even asking for money, and you kind of need to figure out how do you take away all that cynicism and ultimately bring them to where they meet you halfway. So the storytelling is a big part of fundraising, getting your ducks in a row. And I think the last one for me is to just highlight that even in as much as you do so much, you do your unit economics and all that, build rapport, build relationships. Because ultimately, if I'm not a bank, and a bank will basically just look at you in terms of cash flow. If I'm coming in with diluting capital, my approach is I need to feel I can trust you. I need to connect with you. I need to buy into your vision, and not just buy into it, also believe that you are the person who can deliver that vision. So that personal connection is really, really a big, big thing. And it's one of those things that I feel we sometimes take for granted simply because we assume, hey, it's a marketplace for ideas. You funded so and so, why aren't you funding me? My company is even doing better. We have better traction. We have, 1, 2, 3. But if you're not making the effort to actually connect with that other person on the other side of the table, as a human being, first and foremost, forget even as an investor, then you're really just missing the point. Because really, as I said, it boils down to taking a bet on the entrepreneur or the entrepreneurial team that's behind this vision.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Karanja, for that. Lots of valuable points there. Where at the different stages, who do we need to go to raise money? And even in addition to that, as you've talked about, the key to storytelling, that is important to be able to, because really people are giving money because they believe in a cause. So how do you explain your cause in a way that people understand and see its value, right? And even relationships. And again, I commend all the entrepreneurs here. Even it's through forums like this that we begin to build relationships. We begin to get that exposure that we need to be able to raise those funds. So thank you for sharing those insights, Dr. Karanja. I know that we are almost out of time, so I'll just ask about 2 more questions. And so the one question I want to ask is before we move on to the questions and answers. Again, please do keep your questions coming in so we can be able to make sure you come out of this place having all your questions answered. And so this goes to Ruhi. So COVID-19 has definitely heightened our understanding for the need of innovation. And I think we've heard from 1 or 2 panelists how COVID has been, in a way, ended up working for good for their businesses. And so we don't want such that now when things go back to normal, if there's such a thing, we go back to the old way of doing things. So how do we make sure that within our businesses, for the entrepreneurs here, how do we build a culture of innovation, continuous innovation in our businesses? How would you recommend, or how do you do it? What do you do, and you'd encourage also entrepreneurs as well to do? So over to you, Ruhi.
Thank you, Sylvia. To answer this question, I'll probably divide innovation into 2 parts, innovation in your day-to-day activities, and then, huge life-changing innovations that, kind of puts your company into a different trajectory altogether. So in terms of day-to-day innovations, I think it starts right at the time when you hire your first team, or you probably match up with a co-founder, hire your first employee, and so on and so forth. It's something that you need to detect right in the interview stage, like how good is the problem-solving skill of the person that I'm handling. Especially so for a startup, I know, like as a fresh or a new company, you cannot hire somebody who's has huge corporate experience or someone from that caliber. You'll be probably hiring someone who's fresh out of the college. I mean, I'm talking pre-funding stage. In that stage, you need to understand, you need to have a few basic parameters on the personality of the person that you should be hiring into your business to carry forward your dream and vision. And one of the major attribute that you should be looking at is problem solving. Once you have that, and then you can probably depend on the expertise of the person in day-to-day scenarios to now look at those problems, bring to you the solutions, and then as a management team, you take it from there. So for me, in a nutshell, I mean, that's how you start the culture of innovation on day-to-day operations. In terms of huge sort of life-changing, innovative ideas that you need to put into your business, you might want to pivot your business and such. In those ideas, I think it all boils down to the cost of innovation. Like, what is the cost of innovation? What's the benefit of the innovation? Are you in the position right now to go ahead and take that step, right? Like it's difficult for a new business, especially without funding, or if you're bootstrapping, to incur huge costs of innovation. So it's always good to evaluate the ideas, evaluate your cost versus benefit of the innovation. Of course, it's imperative. It's something that COVID has taught us, that none of the businesses without having a sort of like innovating as per the business scenarios can survive. But in terms of major changes, it's always better to understand the cost versus benefit in long term, especially now in wake of COVID, right? As you correctly mentioned, things are going back to normal. Certain things are going back to normal. Certain things have, stayed the way they are, when things were pretty intense with COVID. So again, as a business, it's important for you to analyze your own scenario. There's no sort of one size fits all solution. You need to understand how much of the COVID changes would stick on with your consumers and how much of them would fall off and people would get back to, their previous behavior. And that, I think, should give you a good understanding of how innovative you need to be to adapt to the market of tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you, Ruhi, for sharing that. I really like the fact that you're thinking about it almost scientifically, like not just saying, yeah, innovation is good and having blanket innovation, but thinking about the cost versus the benefit. Because if you innovate and your customers don't appreciate it, then you will not reap the benefit. So trying to understand that. And even as you shared, I was imagining in my mind like a wall with like one place that says, this is what sticks after COVID, if we can call it that. This is what falls off. And then trying to make sure that whatever falls off, we have a way of adapting to that. And again, totally agree, it's an individual journey. This will look different from business to business. And so for my last question, it's really been interesting, but time is not on our side. So, had to skip some questions, but I hope we're all getting something interesting from this conversation. And so one of the things we really wanted to do with this forum is to be able to make sure that everyone who made time to join today lives with some resources that can help them in their entrepreneurship journey. So what I'd request from all the panelists is if you could give us like just one phrase, like your parting shot. What is one thing you want the entrepreneurs to live with today? Like, this is the thing you want to share. And if you have any links to any resources, please do feel free to put them in the chat so that we can have everyone to benefit from that. And just to note, for all those who registered for the event, we'll be sharing a summary of what was discussed, among other things, including the links. So if you did not register, please do leave your email and we'll be able to share this with you even after the event. So again, parting shots. Over to you. We started alphabetically last time when we had everyone share. So this time we'll go in reverse order. So we can hear from Wanjiru, and then Vava, and then Ruhi, and then Dr. Robert, and finally winding up with Angela.
Parting shots. I think the thing that has served us the best is to ask lots of questions and gather lots of data. In our specific case, there was not enough data around how many libraries are there in Nairobi, who's using them, what age are they, why do they come here? So we had to generate that data and make the case for ourselves. And that data that we have is not some of the only data that exists in the country around the library ecosystem. So you mustn't be afraid to ask a lot of questions, because also when you're doing work in the public sphere and you ask questions, that's kind of like it's a dignity note for somebody. If you walk into a library and you ask them what they want, especially in underserved communities like Kaloleni and Eastlands, something shifts about someone when they're like, oh, you actually care what we want to do. So even with your if you're not in the for-profit space, with your consumers and your customers, I cannot underestimate the importance of just asking questions and asking them frequently. And listening to the answers as well, even if it's not what you want to hear, because people told us, libraries, no one wants them anymore. Just let's do high-rise buildings and move on with life. But you have to ask the questions nonetheless.
Wow, powerful insights there. Thanks so much for sharing. Over to you, Vava.
All right. For me, not so much parting shots, but just some things I've also come to learn is one, like Wanjiru just mentioned, know your data, do your research, be patient. I would tell any aspiring entrepreneur, just take the time to learn yourself, know yourself before you embark on an entrepreneurial journey, because it's not easy. Don't do it because you think it's the next big thing. Like a lot of us Kenyans, we like to do things because you saw someone doing it and now you think you can be the next best, I don't know, someone with greenhouses next door and whatever, and you just don't know what it takes. So know yourself and be comfortable with who you are first before embarking on entrepreneurship. You have to adopt a mentality of being a racehorse. Just have the blinds on your sides and just do your thing, especially if you've committed to being an entrepreneur. Otherwise, there will be distractions and there will be people that tell you not to do it because they don't understand entrepreneurship and they don't understand your passion. If I was to give resources, well, I have had the privilege of just reading, like when I'm going through a tough time or whatever, just because also not many people in this space understand entrepreneurship. I'd recommend the book Grit by Angela Duckworth, amongst other resources. So you can follow me on Instagram to just sort of know what I think and what we do and that kind of thing. So that's what I'd say for now. Thanks.
All right. Thanks so much for that. For sharing that, Baba. I like what you're saying. It's about knowing yourself and be ready for the challenges. Yeah, get into business for the right reasons. So thank you so much for sharing that. We'll now move on to a very brief parting shot from Ruhi, and then Dr. Robert, and then Angela.
Thanks, Sylvia. So in addition to what's been spoken before, I think as entrepreneurs, when you enter or embark onto this journey, you kind of enter a new dimension. You take a lot of things with you in terms of skills, ideas, understanding of the whole ecosystem. But when you enter that dimension, you meet like a whole set of new people, which is now looking into investors, looking into co-founders, looking into fellow people, CEOs and founders who've been looking to raise capital. So my quick parting shot would be that immerse yourself in that dimension, surround yourself with people who are on a similar journey or who, are a couple of steps ahead of you, couple of steps behind you, which kind of keeps you abreast with what's going on in the industry. So, in the whole sort of entrepreneurship atmosphere. So yeah, that's a quick shot from me. I think for me, in terms of resources that help me, having a co-founder really helps. I think makes the journey a bit less lonely in terms of entrepreneurship. The network, as I think I mentioned before, in terms of dimensions. And then for us, I think to sort of push us quite into the network was joining certain accelerator programs. That kind of puts you like sort of in the network of relevant people quite quickly. So do consider that. Right. Thank you. Thank you, Sylvia.
Thank you so much. The point of networks, I definitely agree with that. And again, of course, being in that space, immersing yourself in that space. Thank you so much for sharing that with us, Ruhi. And let's now hear from Dr. Robert.
Thank you. I believe we're getting great advice from really just exemplary entrepreneurs. I almost don't want to add anything. For me, personally, what I've seen work is two things. The first one is very early on, before even having a company for anything, I created for myself a personal board of directors, people that believed in me, people that would take their time, and they would actually champion me. So if I was not at that table and they're sitting at that table, they'll actually say, hey, there's this young chap you need to meet. He's called Karanja. He does 1, 2, 3, and this is why you want to talk to him. And that has been a massive, and I've had these guys with me more than 10 years, and it's really just been amazing. The second one is in terms of, as an entrepreneur, we always look at the market, the customer. The investor is another hidden customer, and for you to succeed, you need to build a solution and a business that works both for the customer, the real market, but also for this other hidden customer. If you're actually in the building for market value party, if you're building for profit, maybe not so much. And I mean, it's also a very valid approach. So to me, understanding the investor mindset is also super critical. Understanding that value chain, where you're coming in and why, so that there's better alignment between your needs and their needs is really, really great. And most investors really appreciate people who, entrepreneurs who actually do the homework and they've kind of studied the space and understood this is what so-and-so is doing and why. what's their theory of change, what's their approach, what's their, so kind of just take the time to invest. Again, as I said, go out there, make friends. Business comes later. Make friends, let's connect as human beings, and you'll find that things tend to move much easier that way. Thank you.
Thanks so much. Another great point about relationships, and a support structure. So for you, it took the form of a board, and I'm so impressed that 10 years later, you're still together. And also understanding the mindset of an investor. So the same way we take time to think about our customers, to also think about the investor. Lastly, let's hear from Angie before we open up for questions.
Thank you again. It's been really nice to listen to everybody. I just want to say that I've picked so many points, and I'm going to pick your brains later, speakers. For me, I just want to break it down in Ruhi and I had this similar parting shot, so I won't talk too much, but I'll keep it brief. Network builds your net worth. So make time to connect with people within your network that are especially in the same field as you, because that way you don't need to reinvent the wheel. You might find that there's somebody who's already doing it, and attach yourself to whatever it is that they're doing, by adding whatever something different to, in addition to whatever is already being done. So like for Heals for Pads, we're part of, we're connecting with other people in the menstrual health space to be part of an alliance and to see within our work what can we learn from each other. The other thing, as a part of my introduction, is a Mayali alumni, and I really encourage, I made a decision in end of 2019 to apply to fellowships, and I applied to a lot. I would get rejected. I didn't even know who was rejecting me because I applied to so many. But you know, find a fellowship that is part of whatever it is that you're trying to do. And in addition, I would say get a mentor, like someone who can walk this journey with you, especially in your areas of strength. So my areas of strength within the both organization is the digital side of things and the marketing and the storytelling. So working with someone who can help you nurture that, even outside. So, because you also need to have an exit plan so that your business can continue even without your existence. And then the most important thing, you really need to believe in yourself. No one else can do it for you. You know, you were created for a purpose. So it means that there's something within you that you need to put out there in the world. And lastly, understand your why so that you can be able to tolerate your how. If you don't know why you're doing it, then you won't be able to tolerate your how. You won't be able to knock on those investors' doors. You won't be able to keep going when everything is failing. Like Shira said that, you know, people were like, oh, libraries, you know, why would you invest in that? You know, you've got to learn to understand your why so that you can silence the outside noises and follow what has been put within you. Thank you.
Thanks so much for that, Angela. Really powerful. It's also resonates with what Vava was sharing about, you know yourself, right? Get into business for the right reasons. And you're talking about passion so that even when all comes against us, we're still able to stand. So thanks so much. I think these are really powerful insights. And just to reiterate, we will be sharing a summary of the event with those who registered for the event. So if you didn't, please do leave your email and we'll be able to share this with you. So I'm now going to quickly move on to questions. And as we do that, there's a live poll that's going to come on your screens in just a bit. And so we just want to understand how we want to bring more of these events in future. We want to understand what works, what your interests are, so we can make sure that these events are perfectly curated for supporting entrepreneurs. And so please do, when you see the poll pop up on your screen, please do take some time to fill that in as I ask questions. And so my first one goes to Dr. Robert. And the question here is that, do you believe that funding for Kenyan companies will open up within the time frame of the companies that are here in this call? In other words, I guess, if I interpret this correctly, is like, how long will it take for funding to open up for Kenyan companies? And how do we see, in other words, what are the trends we see that are going to happen within the funding space in Kenya, if I've interpreted that question correctly? So over to you, Dr. Robert, on that.
Thank you, and it's a great question, and I think I have both good news and bad news. The good news is the year-on-year growth of this investment in this continent is upwards of 70% year-on-year growth. I mean, it's like phenomenal, like nothing we've seen before. Already this year, by end of August, we had clocked $2 billion of VC investment in Africa. The question for me, though, is how do you position yourself to be able to ride this wave? By 2023, the World Economic Forum this year was basically saying that we're expecting to see 10 billion, moving from 2 billion to 10 billion in 2 years of venture capital investment in Africa. So my main answer is yes, I think there's lots of money coming our way. My concern, however, is how many of us can absorb ticket sizes of $1 million plus, and how do we mitigate that early stage value of death, that missing middle. And I just want to really encourage, work with ESOs, look for, if you're not in health and you can't work with Build Growth, try and talk to Impact Hub, talk to people who are sector agnostic or energy, or, because we have a fairly sophisticated ecosystem in Kenya today that can actually meet your needs. But you really need to have partners that allow you to be able to leap that gap, so to speak, so that we're able to build traction and eventually position yourself to be able to absorb capital. I hope that answers the question. Okay, yes. Thanks. Sylvia, I think you're on mute. I'm sorry.
Barking. My dogs are barking, so I admitted myself. All right, sorry for that. Yeah, that does answer the question, I believe. Happy that there's a positive outlook, and there's even a challenge to us to see how we can position ourselves for this growth. And I'm glad that even within this call, we're building our networks, and we're going to be able to understand, hopefully over time, how we can be able to do that. If you've not yet answered the poll, that's still live, so please do keep continuing to put your input. And there's a question here, and I think I'm going to direct this to Vava. So as founders of businesses, how best can we motivate and retain team members and associates before getting enough cash flow? So before we can pay them really well, how do we motivate and train a team? Not sure if Vava has had that. But if not, that's okay. Anyone who wants to answer that question on how to motivate a team before we get cash flow positive, feel free to answer.
I can hazard a guess to it, and for me, it goes back to my storytelling. You have to cast a vision. You have to convince people that what you're doing is important and it will pay off. The second thing that I find very important for me is, especially for co-founders, is don't divide the pie like at the onset. Actually have a systematic way of saying, this is how much your time, effort, even capital that you bring in, references you bring in, business that you open, this is how it translates to your equity stake in the company. So that there's a bit of that carrot and kind of reinforcing the vision that you're casting. So two things. Yes, you need to be bold, share your vision and dream boldly, but then also have a way of making sure that there's metrics, there's attribution, and there's fairness. It's transparent, it's fair, and you're able to get people to a point where you arrive at an equitable, do I call it cap table for you and your co-founders.
All right, great. Thanks so much for sharing that. I think I completely agree. That's one of the challenges, right? To just say, okay, we'll split our shares, but how do we make sure that that happens, right? So yeah, completely agree on making sure that the process is transparent and is also systematic, so that it's well thought through. And when we need some shares to give to investors as they come along, they have not all been gobbled up. So thanks for sharing that, Dr. Robert. So I have two more questions I'd like to ask before we close for the event. And the first one, I'd like to ask this to and this would be, would you recommend going abroad for a while to get a more global perspective of things, even as one considers the impact they'd like to create in Kenya and Africa? And Angie, I'd love for you to be able to answer that question. And my next question would probably go to Wanjiru, and anyone else can jump in for that question, who's who's been abroad for a while. And so Wanjiru, have you ever had to completely stop the business to restructure or re-strategize, and how did you navigate that? So maybe we can start with Angie and then we can go to Wanjiru.
Thank you for that question. So for those who don't know, I was born in Kenya but bred in UK. So majority of my life has been in UK. So there's two sides to me. So I feel it's helped me living in the UK, because I think I feel I'm more bolder. I'm not really that scared. I understand, I've come from a society where it's about systems. So when I come at business here, I'm also thinking about, if I'm creating my own business, the kind of systems I want to put in place, and trying to pick things that I've learned from the UK system. So for me, I think it's helped me, because then I'm also part of another founders group where there's other organizations in the UK. So I pick and choose what I can learn. Obviously, I have to adopt it to suit the Kenyan market. However, this is to say my journey is very different to other people. So I think you can grow where you are. I think there's everything that you need where you are. And sometimes you can have this idea that, oh, if I go to UK, or if I go to the States, or if I go to Europe, whatever it is you want to go to, that, the grass is greener in that other side. It doesn't necessarily mean that it is greener on the other side. It just means that perhaps you might be exposed to things that you might not necessarily be exposed within the Kenyan environment. But with technology, I now know how a Japanese house looks like on YouTube. So I feel like, the digital space has allowed us to tap into all these different cultures and traditions without having to leave. But I will say the one thing that governs me is St. Augustine Hippo, who says, to not travel is to only read one chapter of a book. So if you can't live in those societies, I do encourage that you do travel, because you'll pick something from different societies that can help you as an individual, or whatever it is that you're trying to do.
Thanks. Those are really well-balanced comments, Angie. And so I loved what you said, that you can grow where you are, yeah? Based on the opportunities that you have, you can definitely grow where you are. And even the opportunities you have is to travel. You can learn a lot that you can pick here, but either way, that shouldn't stop us from being able to create impact where we want to create it in our local communities, or in our Kenyan context, or in the African context as well. So going back to the poll, there's a second question that's now on the screen. How positive are you about the Kenyan entrepreneurship outlook? You can just take a few minutes to be able to answer that as we go to our next question, and that is to Wanjiru. So have you ever had to completely stop the business to restructure or to re-strategize, and how did you navigate that?
That's a great question. We thankfully haven't had to stop the business yet, but my word, we shapeshift all the time. Our kind of main partner is the county of Nairobi, and every time things go shaky there, we have to figure out what we're going to do. So we've had to really re-strategize over and over again with a critical partner of ours being the government. An election year coming, you kind of have to run your risks and be like, what might happen? Elections here can often tend to shake things up more than they should. So we are constantly re-strategizing. We're not committed to any kind of strategy. All we know is that we want to serve the community, and we want to do that via libraries, and the rest becomes an experiment, to be honest. And we're not scared to experiment. We failed on many things. We've succeeded in many things. But the one reason why it doesn't feel like pulling hairs when we have to change direction is because my co-founder and I have been very deliberate about surrounding ourselves with people who are better than we are at what they do. So for the first 2 years of our organization, it was just the two of us doing everything, as is the case for many entrepreneurs. Yeah. And we were clear that we wouldn't bring on our staff until we could afford to poach the people we wanted from the PwCs, from the banks, from the corporate sector. Because while we're in a nonprofit sector, we don't run book banks like a nonprofit. We run those libraries are like shops that generate revenue, because there's an ethos about I guess the way of nonprofit that we completely reject. But like, libraries can be glamorous, libraries can be places that employ people well. And now we have a team of 27. And those 27 people are better than me at fundraising, at communications, at research, at running the libraries. And that way, when you have a scenario where you have to shapeshift, it doesn't become a burden that's yours. You have somebody who will tell you, oh, the data says this. And if you do take this direction, we have to communicate it this way. And because they're so good, then you kind of trust that you're not carrying the burden alone. So, and it speaks to the previous question about how do you fundraise for people before when you're starting out. And we were really clear that because we've all worked in the cultural space where salaries are really the last thing people think about. You think about the creativity first and the output, then the pay last. And that way you have this high turnover of people leaving, you train people and they go away because you're not being able to pay them, right? We were very clear that until we can pay people well, even leave ourselves, which is not the way to do things. But until we can pay people well and around this vision with a really strong army, we just won't recruit. And that way, re-strategizing becomes something that becomes very, very easy to do.
Mm-hmm. Oh, wow. Thanks. I feel like you've been able to tackle many things with that one question. Really appreciate that. And again, I like the word that you use. We have to learn to become shapeshifters, right? As the situations around us, we are human beings are dynamic. Our environment is dynamic. So shifting shape as is required, I think, that's a useful way of being adaptable to be able to make sure we remain relevant and our businesses stay afloat and thrive. So thanks for sharing that one, Jerome. So as we wind up, we only have 1 more minute. If we could go to I believe, Liz, there's a third question. And so if we could take some time to answer that. We are done with the Q&A section of this call. And I just wanted to share that we are starting a community of entrepreneurs. We want to provide relevant events. We want to be able to make sure that we continue to support entrepreneurs in this journey. I know that right now there's a proliferation of many events online, but we do want to make sure that we are able to curate what is relevant, what speaks to entrepreneurs, what is helpful, what is resourceful. And just like some of our panelists have also shared, things that are building a network of like-minded people who can support us on this journey. So thank you so much for participating in this pause. It helps us to be able to know what we should do going forward. And so just in closing, I want to thank a humongous thank you to all our panelists for, sharing broadly. I think it was Bava who said that you have to learn to become a resource. And so because you're pioneering in a journey, there are people behind you, and that you've been able to freely and generously give your time and your experiences and vulnerably shared so for the audience in the room today. We are really grateful. Thank you for all of you. And even for those who've taken time to attend, we are really grateful, and we hope that you've gotten something from this session. So really grateful about that. In case there are any questions that we are not able to answer as was meant to, we'll still be able to send a summary of the event to all of you, just to make sure that all of us come out of this place with our questions answered. So thanks everyone for attending, and looking forward to doing more of this in future.